Hello, beloved listeners. I'm super excited to let you know that Laughing Planet is sponsoring this episode. Laughing Planet is a restaurant with multiple locations in the Portland area that offers global flavors at an affordable price. Laughing Planet believes that a happy planet requires responsible decisions from plant to plate, so they source ingredients from local farmers. And they help our community in more ways than one. During this COVID pandemic, Laughing Planet has been offering free kids' meals to students who otherwise rely on meal assistance programs at schools. And good news, you can get Laughing Planet delivered to your door or pick up at any location. Just order over the phone through DoorDash, or you can order online, and get this, you can get 20% off by entering the promo code FOURTOP at checkout. That's right, just enter FOURTOP. Give it a try, folks, and you'll be getting healthy, locally sourced food for cheap and supporting the Four Top. Now, time for the show. Hello, and welcome to episode 79 of the Four Top. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. This episode will go live in August when we will all be ready for a vacation from the news, so we thought we'd tackle a more relaxing theme this month, food, film, and fiction. We have three panelists who come at this subject from totally different directions, and I can't wait to hear how this discussion goes. So let's meet our panelists. In alphabetical order, Crystal King is an editor and social media professor, but I know her as the author of two really enjoyable works of food-centered fiction entitled Feast of Sorrow and The Secret Chef. Welcome, Crystal.
Super excited to be here.
And Andrew Rea is the chef, star, and filmmaker behind the addictive YouTube show Binging with Babish. Hi, Andrew.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Nikita Richardson is a food journalist whose work you've seen in New York Magazine, Grub Street, and most recently, The Strategist. Hi, Nikita. Thanks for being here.
Hi, happy to be here.
All right, everybody, let's dish up our first course of conversation on the theme of food, film, and fiction. I'd like to start by talking about the ways in which novelists, artists, filmmakers, whatever you'd like to discuss, use food as a way to encapsulate and illustrate a culture or a time period. And Nikita Richardson, I hear you are a big J.R.R. Tolkien superfan, so I thought maybe we could start this topic with you. How does Tolkien use food to create the world that is Middle-earth?
See, I think before the LOTR stands come after me, I should say I have read the books. I'm just a huge fan of the movies, even more so, because they came out when I was like 11, 12, 13, and like they are my Star Wars is how I put it. But like in both the books, Hobbit, all of that, food is a huge part of it, because especially because Hobbits love food. So, but they're like, what about 11 Seas and all these types of things? They love food. And so like Tolkien uses it really beautifully. Like I think in this kind of like English countryside cooking manner, the food just looks like, you know, I always think about like, what's taters precious? I say that to people all the time. When it's like potatoes, rabbits, it's very rustic. And it just seems like hobbits are so comfort food oriented. And like the only food that you ever hear about like from the elves is like lembas bread, which is like just for sustenance. And you're like, oh, that's boring. I want to be with the hobbits.
I just want to jump in too. I just did a Lord of the Rings special, 2-part special on the 7 Hobbit meals, which are, I should have them memorized by now. They're breakfast, second breakfast, 11s, luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper.
That's awesome.
Did I get it right? And I totally agree. It seems like Tolkien was trying to capture a very specific time in British, like you said, countryside, Yorkshire kind of cuisine, this sort of like Victorian, I don't know if it's Victorian era, I don't know eras, where, there's mince pie and there's salt pork, there's a lot of preserving and candying and it's all this very hearty, wholesome stuff. And it's almost like what every British person wishes they could have for Christmas dinner, but every meal of every day.
Exactly. They eat for pleasure, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and hobbits aren't exactly human, but I feel like the act of eating kind of humanizes them. Like, it really bothers me when I read a novel and no one ever eats or drinks anything or ever like takes a shower or goes to the bathroom. It's like, but like, I want to know that they're like living creatures, and it's something about eating it brings them kind of to everyone's level.
Well, and we
Yeah.
always have to eat. So, like, the absence of food, me is more fictional than anything, actually.
Yeah. And Crystal, in your novels, the dishes are so exotic and interesting. And just reading some of the titles of the dishes makes you realize that this is just a completely different time and place, like flamingo tongues in ancient Rome. I mean, just,
Yes, the ancient Roman gourmand Apicius, he wrote an encyclopedia, basically the world's first encyclopedia, and he states in there that Apicius says that flamingo tongues have the most delicate flavor, and they would have fried them up.
Ugh.
And if you've ever seen a flamingo tongue, they are not pretty, and they have weird, like, spiny things on them, and uh, it's a dish that we don't eat today, and we probably can't get. Most people can't, but that was a very common thing that they ate. And they had a lot of really crazy dishes that in ancient Rome and in Renaissance Rome, which I also write about. But dormice was another thing that they ate all the way from ancient Rome into Renaissance Rome. And in ancient Rome, they had the dormice is it's a rodent that lives in trees. It's a mouse that lives in trees essentially, and they're still found in parts of Europe, and they're still eaten in Czechoslovakia actually. And they would had these jars called gliariums, and they were jars, these terracotta jars with holes in them. They had little tracks in the inside so that they could sit on the ledges, and they would keep them in the dark and fatten them up, and then you would roast them all up, and you'd eat them all bones and all. You'd crunch them all down. So that was a big thing in ancient Rome.
Sounds like a mouse version of the ortolan bunting.
Yes, it really is. They ate those too. They ate every kind of songbird in the same way that you would eat ortolans, but except without the napkin.
Andrew, I want to see those flamingo tongues on Binging with Babish sometimes.
Well, now that they've been said on a piece of media, I can recreate them. So
I would really love to know how you're going to do that one. That would be.
I'm definitely not going to.
Well, they also had pies with that were made to look alive. So you would have a pheasant or a turkey or peacocks or cranes or swans, and the bird, the top of the bird would stick out of the pie, and they would keep the feathers on, and they'd wire up the bird so that it looked like it was real. But then you'd have like a turkey pie underneath it, and those were very common all the way through the Renaissance into the Baroque era. These pies that were meant to look alive. So that could be recreated. That's a little bit more potentially possible if you can get a whole bird.
See, Crystal, I just feel like that we've become so divorced from our foodways,
Yes.
so much of like Western humanity, that we really we can't deal with like the actual, what it actually looks like or would have looked like. And at that time, people knew, like, well, I saw that chicken get killed, and I know what, like, I can't be grossed out seeing it now. And I feel like, but I do know that Noma, the restaurant in Copenhagen, they had this one dish, and it was like part of the main body of the bird, but then they kept like the fully feathered wing on it so that you could see that this was a real thing. You're eating a thing that was once alive.
Right.
It's okay to know that you're eating something that was once alive.
Do you know how it was received? I mean, well, people there probably expected something incredible and amazing. So it might not have been as odd.
I feel like it's one of those things where if you're going to Noma, you kind of know you're not in there you can't be a picky eater and go to Noma. That's just like not on. They don't want you.
Along those same lines, I recreate some of the dishes from the cookbooks that the chefs that I write about did in their real cookbooks. But one of them was a rabbit recipe from the Renaissance, and I was really shocked. It appeared on a blog, and I was surprised at all the comments about how could you possibly eat rabbits and how terrible are you? And I had kind of forgotten that in the United States, because I eat rabbit often, but in the United States, because of Easter, we don't think the bunny is a pet, and people get really freaked out about eating rabbit, which is interesting to me.
Well, I'm sorry to keep moving, but we're going to have to take a short break here and say something about our sponsor. We are so lucky to once again have Zupan's Markets as our sponsor this month. And if you're wondering what to serve for dinner tonight, may I remind you about Zupan's ready-to-heat dinners for four. This month they are offering a barbecue chicken dinner with spicy watermelon jicama salad, cilantro lime slaw, and smokehouse baked beans, all perfect for that socially distanced cookout. Zupan's is also a very fun place to shop with beautifully curated local produce plus artisanally crafted products like, I don't know, cheddar from Face Rock Creamery, booze-spiked ice creams from Two Birds, luscious local wines from producers like Big Table Farm, and more. And we want to remind you that Zupan's Markets in the Portland area are offering a personal shopping and curbside pickup service. That's right, you can call or order online by noon and pick up anything from a bunch of sunflowers to a freshly baked apple pie the same day between 3 and 7 p.m. It makes shopping so much easier and also safer for everyone. Founded by John Zupan in 1975 and now run by his son Mike, Zupan's is Portland's family-owned grocery store with 3 locations to serve you in Portland and Lake Oswego. Visit zupans.com and sign up for the email list to receive exclusive deals and promotions. Thanks, Zupans! Okay, so time for our second course, Crystal King. Your novels focus on key points in history when famous chefs influenced society, culture, and politics by creating meals that were really immersive performance art. So I'd like to speak a little bit about food as spectacle. Could you start us off by describing some of those food spectacles from your novels?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of really amazing spectacles in both of my novels, in Feast of Sorrow and in The Chef's Secret, because the people that I write about are nobility, or they're cooking for nobility. They tended to show off their wealth by having really amazing shows, and so when you would sit down and dine, everything would be orchestrated, from the people serving you your food to the decorations, everything. In Feast of Sorrow, I actually kind of took a little bit of a modern play on the idea of, we have these cooking competitions and we love them. And I think competition is something we've always loved. We know that Apicius, who's this ancient Roman gourmand, he had a cooking school. And so one of the things that I incorporate into the novel is this idea of a cooking school and training people. And there at the school, I have this competition. And it was the foods of Neptune and the foods of Diana, the Roman gods. So it was fish versus meat. And these dishes competed for each other. And Emperor Tiberius decided to vote on them. And he was the one who chose the winner. You have to read the book to find the winner. But then in The Chef's Secret, that's where a lot of really amazing spectacle starts to happen, because there's tons and tons of sugar sculptures and butter sculptures. And I actually have one of the most famous artists in the world, who the chef in my novel, Bartolomeo Scoppi, he wrote a cookbook that came out in 1570, and it was a best-selling cookbook for almost 200 years after it was published. And he was a chef to several popes and cardinals. But because he worked at the Vatican, he probably fed a lot of the artists that were there, or at least knew of them in some way. And so I have a really wonderful scene of Michelangelo helping him create sugar sculptures for a banquet for Emperor Charles. And so that was a lot of fun to play with, because Michelangelo definitely knew how to mold bronze, and you would make these sugar sculptures with molds and hot sugar that you would pour into the molds. So it was a lot of fun to play with these big spectacle foods and put them into these fictional scenes. People love to gawk at our food, and we take pictures today. So it was really, they couldn't do that then, but they could look for a long time at these.
I just want to say that the idea of a cookbook coming out in the 1500s and being a bestseller for 200 years just exploded my brain.
I know, right?
Yeah. The cookbook's amazing. You can pick it up and you can make a lot of the dishes. That's some of the first, like the first turkey recipes are in it in anywhere in the world, because New World was starting to bring birds over. And there's pies, and there's actually a fried chicken recipe. It's really amazing. It's fun to dig through the cookbook.
See, Crystal, on Great British Baking Show, whenever they do, like, when they've done, like, you know, a themed episode around, like, Victorian recipes or, like, old recipes, it always just grosses me out. And the food is like missing all these things that I love so much in modern baking and modern cooking, which is like butter instead of like, lard and all those types of different things. But I can imagine that, I think like we've also lost this kind of time where there's a recipe that, was made a staple, and we don't really do that as much anymore because like recipes are very, you get the recipes from where you read now. You get them from NYT Cooking. You get them from, Epicurious. You get them from Serious Eats. And everyone can have a different thing that they go to their recipes for. But it used to be like everyone's mom knew how to make this recipe from Joy of Cooking.
It's really a relief to me to find out that food has been about spectacle for so long, because it kind of bums me out sometimes when people are posting pictures of food on Instagram that looks positively inedible, or if you ate it, you'd be sick for days because it's so impossibly sweet or drowned in cheese. So it's nice to know that that's not a new phenomenon.
Well, there's a movement, an art movement before World War II in Italy called the Futurist, which was an art movement primarily, but there's a cookbook called the Futurist Cookbook, and it's all this food in it, but almost all of it is inedible. It's got all these to go through it is really interesting because it's food that doesn't look like what it's supposed to, and the flavors wouldn't necessarily taste like they're supposed to. I think people have always liked the idea of taking something that nourishes us and changing it into something that's entertaining, because we all come together over food, right? So let's make it entertainment too.
And since I suspect that my job here is to be the guy who talks about the movie foods, I have to draw a parallel to Big Night, because the big feast at the end is
my favorite scene.
That. Yeah, no, it makes you hungry, despite knowing that when you start to nitpick it a little bit, timpano is really pointless. It's a far too complicated lasagna with whole boiled eggs in it, and then after they've just stuffed everybody full, they wheel out a whole roasted suckling pig, and the whole thing is a spectacle of that era, and it was meant to impress Louis Prima, which, no spoilers,
doesn't show up.
Oh, come on.
Can I back you up? Can you tell everybody what a timpano is? Because not everyone may be familiar with it.
So timpano is Italian for timpani drum. So that's what it resembles. It resembles a giant drum. And what it really is a giant pasta shell that's filled with layers of pasta sauce, meatballs, sausage, cheeses, and whole hard-boiled eggs for some reason. And it is purely spectacle because it stands a solid 8 to 12 inches tall, depending on how it's being made. The one in the movie is a solid foot tall, and it's what it really is a worse lasagna. And so it really is truly for the spectacle, for the look, for the
origins of it come from the Renaissance and the Baroque era. It was a way to show off money and wealth because you could put all of this stuff in one pie, really.
Wow, I did not know that, and that makes perfect sense. That's even though the movie takes place in the 50s, I believe, a somewhat contemporary version of the kind of feasts that you're talking about, where it is style over substance. That movie is about the battle of style and substance in some degree, because they're battling with Ian Holmes' restaurant, which is really all about style. And so they try to bring some of that to their quality cooking, and it results in one of the great film feasts of all time, maybe the great film feast of all time. I don't know where I'm going with this.
So, and Andrew, some of our listeners may not be familiar with binging with Babish, but I believe you recreated the timpano on Binging with Babish, didn't you? And maybe you could just tell our listeners a little bit about what your show, the concept of your show.
Well, concept of my show is simple. I just recreate foods from movies and television. Like we said before, food is a universal experience, and in fiction, it offers us the opportunity to have a tangible piece of our favorite movie or TV show that we can actually experience with all of our senses ourselves and live vicariously in that way. So that's the goal of my show, is to actualize these fictional fets.
What was the dish that you thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to record this and make it what started you? I'm really curious about that.
what started me was a little show called Parks and Recreation,
Mhm.
which I never set out to make this my career. It was a very accidental career path. This show, I just wanted to practice some food photography, and I was screwing around in my kitchen, and Parks and Rec was on in the background, and Ron and Chris engage in a burger cook-off to see if Chris, who's kind of a health nut, if he can make a turkey burger that tastes better than a beef burger. And so he dresses up this crazy over-the-top burger. I believe I have this memorized. It's a turkey burger with a Taleggio cheese crisp, um, a papaya chutney, a black truffle aioli, uh, microgreens on a gluten-free brioche bun. I believe that's all the elements. And I heard all those sort of foodie buzzwords in a row, and I knew it was the writers just having some fun. But I was also like, would that actually taste good? Like, do any of those flavors make sense together? Does it actually taste good? And my conclusion in the first episode of the show was, yeah, it does taste good. It's been several years now, and I've made it once again since, and it's not that great. It's whatever.
It's too many things.
But yeah, it's too many things. Like papaya chutney and black truffle aioli, they don't those bump.
Simple is better.
Yeah, exactly. And the conclusion of the characters on the show is that the beef burger, just plain grilled burger, no cheese, no ketchup, is better. And it truly is. Like, I've never met a turkey burger that outpaces a beef burger. It just tastes better.
I mean, it also strikes me, Andrew, that you mentioned that Ian Holm is in Big Night, and Ian Holm also, R.I.P., he recently passed away, and he's Bilbo Baggins in Lord of the Rings. And so it all comes back together. It's all, everything's connected.
It all comes back to Ian Holm, character actor, may rest in peace. Yes.
I actually did last summer I ranked the meals in movies around chefs, just on the basis of the meals themselves, not the chef, not how good the movie is. And I actually just fell onto Babette's Feast. I thought that was that seemed like the best meal I could have ever eaten, in my opinion. I was like, it's beautiful, it's humble, but it's like the best meal ever. But it's also like you're doing it in like this sad little cabin. And I was like, I think that is the meal I could, eat as my final meal and die happy.
And I made one of the dishes from Babette's Feast. I did the quail stuffed with truffle. What was it? Cayenne sarcophage.
Yes, I have tiny roasted quails wrapped in puff pastry with foie gras.
That meal in Babette's Feast, you're like wanting to laugh and cry at the same time, and no one at the table can show emotions, but you can just feel them welling up in their bodies. They're having this emotional response to the food. And of course, I'm a wine geek, so I loved all the wines that Babette poured. And she emptied out her wallets, impoverished herself to serve this meal. So if listeners haven't seen this film, go look it up. I think it's on Amazon.
But if we're like ranking movies, I mean, I would have to go with like Tampoco, the ramen movie, Tampopo.
Oh yeah.
Like if you're talking about quality of a movie and great food, beautiful.
Well, I think it's time to move on to our third course. Our courses all really kind of interconnect on this episode. But Andrew, when we were talking about what we were going to discuss for this episode, you brought up a really interesting idea, which is, can fictional foods change reality? So you actually shared with us a couple of examples. One of those was Jurassic Park. The film nearly drove Chilean sea bass to extinction. Can you tell us about that episode in recent history?
I've read that. I read that on Vice, and I've accepted it as fact. I'm pretty sure that's true. It's I don't know how easy it is to prove something like that, but the legend goes, the Vice News legend goes that at least several genus of sea bass was nearly fished into extinction after its mere mention on Jurassic Park. You do see it briefly, but the fact that a movie could have that kind of impact, not just on a trend, but on an ecosystem, a species. More recently, Szechuan sauce created a phenomenon that had some regrettable outcomes in the form of miniature riots at McDonald's when they didn't supply enough Szechuan sauce to ravenous fans because it was mentioned in Rick and Morty. And it is just interesting to me how especially now, food is able to have such a cultural impact, positive or negative.
Yeah, and Sideways is also one that I think about a lot too, and how it affected Pinot Noir sales. And so, whenever I order Pinot Noir or we get a bottle of it, my husband he used to sell wine, and he just kind of raises his eyebrow at me, but it's all good because we had lots of conversations about how suddenly no one wants Pinot Noir, and it started disappearing from menus.
And at one point he screams out, "I'm not drinking any Merlot,"
Yes.
and just Merlot sales just tank, even though he's just.
But I have to point out he's drinking Chateau Cheval Blanc out of a plastic cup at the end, so he actually is drinking Merlot. It's just not California Merlot. Okay,
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's my husband loves to point that out. Yeah, it's such, and the only people that would really get that would be the wine geeks.
Guilty as charged. Yeah, I mean, but in addition to, changing the economics of the wine industry or the fishing industry, there's also just this, phenomenon where people come out with cookbooks that are devoted to recreating the meals that they see in films or read about in fiction. And Nikita, I know you're right. Everything does come back to the Lord of the Rings because I stumbled upon this massive website of recipes from Lord of the Rings, and there must be hundreds and hundreds of recipes on there. It's kind of crazy.
I mean, I just think that, when people, like, if J.R.R. Tolkien wanted, he could have had another life as a cook, like, as somebody who wrote exclusively about food, because I think it's like, I think people who are able to write well about food also love it. And that's why, like, the stories about food that transport you are the ones written by people who, like, just know how to eat. Like, eating is a skill. Like, you can do it, like, for sustenance, but appreciating food as you eat it is another skill. It's something that you have to, like, kind of cultivate. I remember, like, when I was in high school reading, like, Water for Chocolate, the magical realism novella, and, like, that book has recipes, and a big part of it too is that, like, food could transform your very existence, and you can drive people crazy with your chocolate and, like, all that. And I think Tolkien had, like, a handle on that.
And like Water for Chocolate, the idea that you can express emotions through food. Another novel that comes to mind, The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake by Amy Bender, and like Water for Chocolate's by Laura Esquivel. And there's also a great film from that book that everyone should check out if they haven't already. And I love the idea that you can actually taste the emotions of the chef.
Gunter Grass has a book called The Flounder, and it was a book he wrote for himself for his 50th birthday. And it's about this flounder and a man who basically keeps being reincarnated throughout history, and he is in love with the women in his life are all chefs. And so I have this, like, game that I play with myself. It's the book's, I don't know, probably 1,200 pages long. I'll open up a page to see if I can find a page without food on it. And it's really difficult to do. And he has this incredible way of just making you feel everything that's being eaten, and you do it for 1,200 pages. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I had brought up the issue of Turkish delights as,
yes,
the one food that captured the imaginations of millions. And there's a story that came out years ago about how, upon finally figuring out what Turkish delights actually are, the author felt incredibly betrayed. And I mean, at the time I thought that article was so funny, but I've been thinking about it more in the context of, what the food world is going through right now, which I think everyone knows is a big upheaval about who owns what recipes, how do we pay attribution, and, that kind of stuff. And just thinking that, like, especially in the Western world, like, learning to, if not appreciate, then understand that dessert is different in every culture. What's sweet is determined by what's available. And so the Turkish delight is just so born of what is available in Turkey. You know what I mean? And how the Turkish delight ended up in a book by, an English author is beyond me. But apparently it tricked generations of children And I was like, well, maybe if those children had grown up with Turkish delights, they wouldn't feel so tricked.
Well, I think it speaks a lot to how food travels across cultures. The Arabs are the ones that brought sorbet and frozen and flavored ices when they conquered Sicily in really early times, like 800 AD. And when they came there, it's so hot that they were very fond of flavored ice types of dishes, and they would bring ice from the mountains, and they would keep it preserved. And so they had this idea of these flavored ices, and that has become Italy's national treasure. Gelato is amazing, but we love it all around the world. I think it's interesting how culture starts to merge and mix, and foods that we think are quintessentially from a certain country might not be.
Yeah.
People love to take food as their own. There's an argument over fried chicken. Who created fried chicken? I've seen that a lot of people in the South feel very strongly it's a Southern food. The Scots sometimes you can see that they claim that they invented it. But there's a recipe in the Scoppy book that is for fried chicken, and it's pretty much a fried chicken recipe, except it has cinnamon, coriander, and clove in it. So people co-opt things into their own cultures, and I find it really fascinating.
I'm about to co-opt that recipe. That sounds delicious.
Oh, it's fun. I'll send it to you.
I think we always have to think hard about thinking about the origination of something, and then thinking about how it can be perfected or taken to another level. Because I think, especially if you think about America, we have the best. Whenever I think about American food, not American food, but food in America, I feel like we almost have the best of everything, because we get we bring it into this environment, and then and then we get the best of you can get the best Persian food here, the best, you know what I mean? But if you go to other places where they don't have that connection, or they don't have that big immigrant population, then you can't get I wouldn't go to necessarily the UK to get great Mexican food. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Because that's not a part of that culture. And I think that we're Americans are so lucky, because we get so many different cultures, and you can get a really great version of almost everything you can imagine over here.
Now you're starting to, if you go to Italy today, you can start to see more cultures, more immigrants starting to create restaurants. You can find sushi anywhere, and you can always Chinese is the universal food. I think you can find that pretty much everywhere you go. But now you're starting to see other types of foods. But when I first started going over a decade ago to Italy for research for my novels, it was really difficult to find any other kind of food other than Italian food. And often and it's still true today, in Rome, you would only eat you mostly eat Roman dishes, and in Venice, the dishes are really different, and there's dishes that you only get regionally. And it's interesting because here it's exactly that. You can get anything you want for the most part. But it's definitely not true in other parts of the world.
It really reminds me of when I was in French class as a middle schooler, high schooler, that there's this organization built to protect the French language from the incursion of slang and all these other words. And it's but don't those things enrich the language? You know what I mean? When you create new things from the same language. And I think it's the same with food, that you have to protect the core of it, but allow it also to be changed and warped to almost to people's taste a little bit, without bastardizing it, so to speak, but allow it to change, because change can be a good thing. It really can. And you can create something that's better, richer, because it's influenced by so many different other things, while still, honoring and paying tribute to the original.
That's beautiful. I wish that people would apply that to most of, everything going on in the world today. I wish people had that outlook on, everything.
That being said, I feel like everyone should watch Taste the Nation, the new Padma Lakshmi show on Hulu, where she goes to different immigrant communities within the United States and tries their food. So Persian people in LA, Thai people in Las Vegas. And it's so beautiful, so well done, because she's just showing how people are preserving their traditions, like we've been saying, but then also being okay, I live in America. I know that, and I want to share what I make with Americans. I'm not trying to keep it away from them or protect it or make sure or treat it like it's overly precious. And I think it does a really beautiful job of that every episode.
Yeah, definitely will check that out. I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
That seems like a really great place to wrap up our conversation. And at the end of every show, we do a dessert course where we each share a little something, just kind of a little bonbon, a little parting bonbon. And I was wondering if we could go around and each of you could share kind of a favorite moment, a favorite dish from fiction or art or film that's stuck with you.
I have I'm sorry, I have a canned answer for this, but I have a tattoo of pasta allo olio from the movie Chef, which is an extraordinarily simple dish. It's 7 ingredients, 8 if you include boiling water, and it comes together to make, it's just a garlic, olive oil, little red pepper flake, and some parsley and pasta, and it's basically a dish about taking very simple things, putting them together, and making something greater than the sum of its parts. And I think it's encouraged a lot of people who watch my show to try cooking for the first time, because a lot of people tag me on Instagram like, oh, I tried cooking for the first time and this was very easy and it was really good. And I love the empowering nature of that dish. That's my favorite food from fiction.
I love that. Crystal, do you have a favorite fictional food moment you want to share?
Oh, there's so many. We've talked about a lot of them. The Tepano is definitely one of mine. But one of my favorite food movies is also it's not a very appetizing movie, but it's still one of my favorites. It's The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, which came out in 89, and it has Helen Mirren in it. And it is a crazy, beautiful, and disturbing movie. And it's all about food, but not in any of the ways you would imagine. So if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to ruin any of it for you.
Not appropriate for children.
Definitely not appropriate for children.
How about you, Nikita? Do you have a favorite fictional food moment?
I thought of it, and I can't believe I didn't think of it immediately, because it really formed my idea of how beautiful food could be at the age of 13. Is Spirited Away, and really any Miyazaki movie, but especially Spirited Away, and the scene where and it's so funny because I feel bad because I need to look up, I don't know every food, I just know what it looks like, because I didn't know what Japanese food was really at that point. I'm still learning every day. But there's a scene where she's given a little treat to, a little dinner to eat, and she's just so sad because her parents have been turned into pigs. This is Chihiro, the main character, and she's just so sad that she starts eating this thing, and these big fat tears just start falling from her eyes because she's so sad, but apparently just so happy to be eating too, because she's had the hardest day ever. And I can relate to that so hard when you have that that meal, you've had a really long day and you're so sad, and then you have a good meal and it just breaks your heart again. That scene, every single time I see it, it just breaks my heart.
That's a beautiful food movie. It's the closest thing I've ever seen to a dream being put to film. It's so surreal and dreamlike. And if it's any consolation about not knowing what the food is, I've had a million requests for me to make food from Spirited Away, and there's actually a huge debate as to what a lot of those dishes are.
Okay, that does make me feel better.
So I'm still researching that one. I'll get back. I'll let you know when I find out what that stuff is.
I feel like if you don't know what's in it, that gives you lots of license. I mean, that's what I do in historical fiction. If I don't know the history, I just get to make it up.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I were that creative.
Well, so for mine, Nikita, I think I'm stealing this from an article you wrote, but I loved that movie. I think it came out last year, where Ali Wong is a chef. It's called Always Be My Baby, and she's dating Keanu Reeves, and he's just intolerable. I mean, he's playing this total bore, and they go to this sort of haute cuisine restaurant, and he just hams it up, and he's so funny, just being a complete food snob. So, and that one's on Netflix, so people can check that out pretty easily. And also, I love what you just said about trying to figure out the foods from Spirited Away, because as per our previous topic, we learn so much about other cultures from fiction, and fiction sort of I don't know, it engages our senses in another way. It delights us, and it makes us really curious to learn more in a really sort of positive way. So this has
Yeah.
been so much fun to talk about this with you all. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Nikita Richardson. You're a food journalist whose work we've seen in New York Magazine, Grub Street, and The Strategist. Crystal King, thanks for being here, editor and social media professor, author of historical foodie fiction. And Andrew Rea, the chef and filmmaker behind the addictive YouTube show Binging with Babish. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is great.
Today's episode of The Four Top was recorded in remote locations all over the United States. I'm here in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in my bedroom. Izzy Kramer is our tireless producer. Keelan King is our editor and sound guru. He also composed and performed our theme music. Special thanks to the web staff at OPB who bring our show to life on the Oregon Public Broadcasting website, as well as to sound supervisor Stephen Cray. You can check out our dedicated website, thefourtop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, donate to the show, and reach out to us on social media. And if you've not already subscribed, please do on iTunes, NPR One, or Spotify, and please help us out and leave a rating. I'm your host, Catherine Cole, and I'm going to go watch some food movies right now. Bye-bye. Hey, everyone, before I let you go, I wanted to let you know about PDX SOS. Micro-enterprises make up the engine of our economy, and while Portland's small businesses are experiencing temporary closures during the pandemic, PDX SOS encourages Portlanders to make the pledge to shop, dine, and support the small independent businesses that make our city so amazing and special. Here's how you can help. Head over to pdxsos.com to purchase a gift certificate from your favorite local and independent boutiques, restaurants, service providers, and more. The members of PDX SOS would like to thank the Portland community for their ongoing support. Thanks, guys.